All right. Welcome to the Brains and Banter Podcast. We are so excited to have the very talented, the very handsome, the very charming Calvin 2 slash Kalvonix with us. He is an amazing rapper. He's just like fun as hell. And we just can't wait to talk to you. I was thinking a good way to start off, because you do such a good job of telling like your personal story and how you sort of came to what you're doing now. Do you feel comfortable just starting us off with that?
For sure, of course. Yeah. So y'all can't see it now, but I am on crutches and I roll around in a wheelchair for longer distances. I was born with cerebral palsy. And so essentially, because I have tighter muscles and I don't have good like motor functions and balance, I've always had to use either crutches or a walker to get around. And so when I was born, when I was super young in like my really early years, my parents, I was always fortunate enough to have parents that just loved me for me. They just kind of went about their day. They put in all the work behind the scenes that I don't even really think about. Like they bought tons of books on cerebral palsy and research like what's best to take care of someone with cerebral palsy. And obviously, when I'm young, like I don't really think about any of that. I'm like, okay, that's just like a normal thing to do. So I didn't really think much about having a disability, or I wasn't really even aware that I had a disability. And then kindergarten happened, and I remember that first day of kindergarten. You have to kind of line up, at the front of the school, and the teacher has to let you in. And so all of the students are lining up. And I remember walking with my grandma. She walked me to school on the first day. And I was on my crutches. So I'm kind of just walking really slowly. And I'm walking to the door and I see all of these students, and all of them, they all had their eyes on me and like really wide, like, why is he on crutches? Like, why is he using those canes? And I was like, damn, like, all right, like maybe I'm good looking, but like, shit, what's going on here, right? And I felt it was weird because for the first time, I really felt, that's when I felt different, like, because I didn't feel different at all at home with my family. And so it was just really new for me. It was a new feeling. I didn't know if I liked it or not yet. And then I would start to hear things, I would hear, two kids talking to each other and be like, his legs must be broken. And so, that was a common theme. Like a lot of my young peers thought my legs were broken. In my head, I'm like, that doesn't really make sense because I'm still like using my legs to walk, but okay. And then, unfortunately, what ended up happening was, the bullying started shortly after that. And I think, especially when you're, as young as, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, around that age range, it's like when you really don't understand something or someone, unfortunately, it can lead to bullying. And so that's essentially, yeah, exactly. And so essentially what ended up happening was, by the time I started to, go like grade 2, grade 3, I started to hear the word cripple tossed around quite often. And I was told, my parents don't love me because I have a disability and they're going to give me away one day. And I was convinced, like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, are my parents really like faking the love and they're going to, give me away? And then eventually it led to physical bullying. And so I was, kicked down on the gravel. I was whipped with skipping ropes. I was tied to flag posts. And it was just a really dark time for me. And I was a really quiet kid. It was not to put any of my cousins on blast. So I'm not gonna name drop them. But even my cousins who went to school with me, who were similar in age, it was like when they got to school, because they were in the popular crowd, it was like they would pretend that they didn't know me when they got to school, but they would be all friendly with me at home. And so I didn't really have anyone to lean on, especially in elementary school. And so I remember one very specific day, I came home from school, I was crying, and I told my mom, like, why do I have this disability? Like, I hate it. Please take it away from me. I don't want it. Like, why do I have cerebral palsy? Why did God make me this way? And I remember, like, thinking about it now, I can't imagine, like, a child of mine saying this to me. And as a parent, like, I don't even know how I would react. Like, it's just really heartbreaking. But I remember my mom, she didn't bat an eye. She just kind of took me in her arms and she said, Calvin, I believe you have this disability for a reason. And I honestly feel like you're going to use it one day to help people. And I remember even as young as I was like, okay, that's such a mom response. Like in my head, I was like, that's the most mom response ever. And I didn't really understand it. But then I discovered a song. And it was a song called The Real Slim Shady. And oh man, when The Real Slim Shady came out, I remember, so the kids, like when Eminem, this was like, you know, like really early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. I remember like the kids loved Eminem because he was like new, raw, edgy. Everything was like Backstreet Boys and like Ricky Martin. And then like Eminem comes out and it's very like, oh my gosh, like he's saying like, he's dropping F-bombs everywhere. And like all the kids are like, this is amazing, right?
So well, especially because they're seeing a white guy doing it for the first time, really.
Right, yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, so it's like happening and they're like, what? And so the kids loved Eminem, but the parents were terrified. And I remember like my mom told me, she sat me down, she's like, Calvin, you're not going to listen to Eminem. You're only going to listen to the clean version on the radio. I remember that. And so I wasn't allowed to listen to Eminem. I was a goody two-shoes kid. So I was like, okay, mom, like if you don't want me to listen to Eminem, that's fine. But my mom forgot a very, very, very critical element of my life. My mom forgot that I'm Filipino. Filipinos have karaoke parties. Right? Karaoke parties with Filipinos have cousins. And cousins are usually pretty hip to the latest and greatest in the music scene. And so one night I remember it was like a drug deal. Like I remember like my cousin pulled it out of his jacket pocket, an Eminem CD. And he was like, Calvin, I got it. And he passed me the Eminem CD through his sweater pocket. And I remember I took it. I felt like I was the coolest, most badass kid on planet Earth. And I went home and at very low volume, so my mom doesn't hear, I remember I played Eminem for the first time, the full album. And yes, the parents were right. Like he did swear a lot. Yes, he did say some things that are can be considered very offensive. Yes, and controversial. Yes, and I don't deny any of that. But what I connected with the most right away, even as young as I was, I connected with the fact that at the core of it all, Eminem was taking his struggles, whether that was growing up in a trailer park or that was not having enough money to feed his child or his family or not getting along with his mother. And he put it in some words that rhymed and he like over exaggerated it, like made it like cinematic, like a movie. And now people love him for it and we're connecting. And I was like, you can do this, right? So, and this is where my dad jokes come in. This is the dad joke portion of my story here. So I became a rapper. I went to the dollar store because all rap careers start at the dollar store. I was like, I want to be a rapper. All rap careers start at the dollar store. 50 Cent went there twice. So yeah, I bought my first journal and I wrote my first rap and it was called Chicken Lickin', and it was about my love for KFC. I thought I would start on a very light note. I still remember part of it. It was like, eat chicken, it's finger licking good. Go eat chicken if you could. There you stood, sitting on wood, chicken strips you could hardly resist. There you see kids with their lids eating ribs, sucking on a straw, playing with a chainsaw. The silver blade begins to fade as it slices the chicken. Then they start picking at the meat of the chicken. something like that. But anyway,
You got a lot of inline rhymes in there for your first rap.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So I remember I set up a mini concert in my room, and I put out, 2 chairs for my parents. Some of I had a really big stuffed Mufasa. I put Mufasa at the top there, and I set up a little mini concert in my room, and I was so nervous that I hid my face with the piece of paper that I was reading. And when I put the paper down, my mom was crying, and I was like, "Oh shit! Do I suck? Am I that bad? What's going on, right?" And but I remember my mom saying, "Calvin, that was really good," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you, Mom." And I just, at that point, I think it was the first time, reflecting back on it now, and even talking to my mom about it, all these years later. It was the first time that my mom really saw me just forget for a second about all of the struggles that were happening at school, being bullied, being sad about my disability. I honestly just looked, sounded, and felt comfortable when I was rapping. And so because my mom recognized that right away, she just encouraged me to keep rapping. And so I ended up teaching myself recording software, how to use it, what mic to get. And I ended up self-producing my own albums. And I made it a goal of mine that no matter what, whether I was at school, whether I was working, I was always going to insert my passion for rap wherever I could. And so people would know me as the rapper. And so because of that, because I just inserted myself whenever I could, as a rapper, eventually it led to, in 2010, when I was in grade 12, my cousin, who's an event planner in Vancouver, when the Olympics were here, she invited me to perform in front of 12,000 people in Yaletown. And oh my gosh, it was nerve-wracking. And I performed my own version of Empire State of Mind. So my cousin, who's also a singer, instead of New York, it was Vancouver, And and people, people loved it, and they started chanting Kalvonix, and it was the most amazing night of my life, definitely, hands down. And what's wild is, and what kind of shows how everything is kind of full circle, and life has a funny way of working itself out, is during that night, within the crowd was a man named Chinninjeti. And if you don't know who Chinninjeti is, Chinninjeti actually that year in 2010 won a Grammy for his work with Eminem. And so Chinninjeti, he has a studio here in Vancouver. I believe he lives in Langley now. And he invited me to his studio in Gastown that he had. And I remember going there, and I promise you, swear to God, this is as dramatic as I'm making it sound. It was literally this dramatic. So I go into the studio, I open the door, and the door creaks, and his face is facing me. So I don't see him right away. And he's in front of this big monitor. And I don't see him yet, but I just hear his voice, and he's like, "Are you Kalvonix?" Right? And and when I'm nervous, my voice goes really high. So I was like, yeah, right. And he turns around, and he was like, "It's an honor to meet you, sir." And I remember walking up to him to shake his hand. And he went to shake my hand. He got up from the chair. But before he shook my hand, he had to reach out to his left. And on the wall were his crutches. And he grabbed his crutches and he walked to me. And that's when I realized that, like me, Chinninjeti, he has polio. And so he also has a disability. And he's working with my idols like Drake, Lil Wayne, Eminem, all of these people. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this is possible. I can do this. And he taught, as a 17-year-old kid, I thought I was going to be signed. I thought I was going to be Justin Bieber level fame right there, boom. But no, it obviously doesn't work that way. But he just told me to keep going. And I kept going. And me and Chin and Jetty, we don't talk often, but we do keep in touch every now and then. We check in with each other, which is really cool. Yeah. And now that streaming is a thing and Spotify exists, I've now garnered over, 2 million streams on Spotify. And for some reason, one of the biggest places that listen to Kalvonix is like Jakarta. Like, really? Like, what? Like, and it's just amazing. And so I try as a rapper to just encourage students and everybody that I speak to that, find your version of rap music. Like, rap is my passion. I decided to stick with that and put myself out there. And I really hope that I can inspire others to do the same.
Oh, you're doing it. Holy shit, Calvin. Yeah. Like, you're so amazing at storytelling too. Like, all of us, I've heard the story too. And I'm like, what's going to happen next? Yeah, and you're like, yeah, it's so amazing. You're just so inspiring. And instead of me talking, I was thinking, because all three of you beautiful, beautiful people also, are passionate about different types of art. So like lyrics, poet, and Nas is a spoken word poet. And Anna, I know you say you don't do poetry, but you write in your journal. And again, she's an actor. So does that all resonate quite a bit? Like, do you feel that way about your own art and craft?
Oh yeah, especially as someone who used to write music. I did all of high school, and then in my 20s, I took a break from writing because you know how trauma affects art and shit. But last year, I started writing again, and it was like breathing again. It was like suddenly I had this whole piece of myself outside of everything that was going on in my life that was actually just mine. Even if I was someone who was sharing it with people and had friends who I read poetry with every weekend.
Right. Yeah. Like, becomes a part of yourself. That's what it is, Calvin. Eh? Like, that's just, you are the rapper. That is
hands down. Yeah. Exactly.
And the coolest rapper, by the way. I want to hear everything, but Nas, Anna, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Kind of, a little bit. Kind of like building on what Lyric just said on the whole, like, poetry, like writing again, being like breathing again. Totally get that. Have you ever had a moment where you feel like you had to detach from the music and detach yourself from rap, or kind of step away from the art? Like it wasn't like you weren't able to like create? Has that ever happened to you?
That's a solid question. I really enjoy the question. Honestly, I don't know how else to say this, but I very, very rarely get writer's block when it comes to creating music. Fortunately, like, I know that that's not the case for everybody. But I think the reason why is just my approach to music and just the way I view rap music in general is, while there is a lot of me, in the same sense, Kalvonix is also a character. It's a very like exaggerated version of who I am. And just like how Eminem has Slim Shady, right? And it's very like, whenever he has like really exaggerated thoughts, whether it's violent thoughts or really truthful thoughts, he like has this Slim Shady persona. And that's kind of how I see my music, where it's like, it's still very me at its core. And everything that I'm rapping about is things that I've experienced, but it's on a very cinematic, like exaggerated way. So in a way, even when I feel like I'm getting too close to it, or maybe I have to step back, I also feel like I'm playing a character at the same time. So I can easily just become Calvin again. And I think that just comes from my love of movies. Like, I love movies and I'm very dramatic. I love horror. Like, I have Michael Myers tattooed on my left arm. And like, I'm very, I love horror movies. I love just over dramatic 80s horror movie acting. So I'm like, And I was, before rapping, I wanted to be an actor. And so I went to acting school. I went to Tarleton training in Vancouver. My dream was to work with Hilary Duff because I had the biggest crush on her. Yeah, that was the dream. Yeah.
It's girl next door for our generation.
Right? Yes. I guess I've kind of carried my passion for acting into rap music, because I just feel like every time I'm making a song, I feel like I'm making a movie, just like a sonic version of that. And that's why I'm able to kind of step out and just live out my day when I'm not at the mic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that kind of goes back on what Bryn was saying. You're an amazing storyteller.
Yes.
And, and like acting and like storytelling, I think a combination of all of that. I have another question. Have you ever felt like you have to like hold back? Because I know that you talked about transparency and like kind of like, how a lot of artists, specifically rappers, especially ones that like back in the 90s and the 80s, they were very see-through. I feel like now rap has changed a lot. Like back in the day, they like, they were touching and talking about shit that like nobody else was ready to talk about. Do you feel like you've had to hold back, or do you think you're pretty transparent with your work?
Generally speaking, I feel like I'm pretty transparent and I can be myself because at the end of the day, like there are obviously topics that are still very like taboo, and that maybe it isn't the time in society where people are ready to hear a certain type of song, something like that. Whereas like for me, the topics that I'm passionate about in writing, I'm gonna cover anyway. So like mental health, disability, anxiety, and just like my general struggle, I'm comfortable talking about all of that. So I'm pretty transparent with that. And I think, even back in the 90s, like when Eminem was, talking about, like, for example, Eminem has a song called Kim, right? Where he basically kills his like ex-wife like in front of his kid. And it's a really super violent, intense, scary song. And I feel like if like a parent heard that, they would be like, what am I allowing my child to listen to? This is not a great thing. But it sounds weird to me even talk about it like this, but I found a beauty in that, in the sense of he didn't actually kill his wife. He like was really angry. He probably had those thoughts, and he had all those angry thoughts, and he put it into music at the rarest, most rawest, most like unpleasant way. Yeah. But humans still connect to that song because maybe we don't like to admit it, but there's always going to be times where we feel those really ugly, raw, like not meant for the public type thoughts. And Eminem was brave enough to put that on a beat. And so I try to do the same.
Very well, too.
I think that's one of the most amazing things about writing, particularly from a persona. I think the persona can unlock so much that we're afraid to say when we're being our day-to-day selves. And that from the perspective of our persona, I think of writing like archaeology in some ways when I'm writing nonfiction, just digging for something honest that I can turn into something beautiful, whether it's grotesque and horrific or violent in Eminem's case. And I totally put that in your lyrics as well. I'm curious what your process is, if you're up for talking about your writing process.
For sure. Yeah. My process is, it varies depending on the type of song and what it is, but like I usually start with just like anything can inspire me pretty much. I could be literally like, I'm very aside from like rap and stuff, like generally speaking, I'm very inspired by like the past, like decades that were like before my time. So I love like 50s diners. I love like going vinyl shopping and discovering music that I've never heard of before. Fort Langley, like I don't know if y'all been to Fort Langley. That's like my favorite place on earth because it has this like small town vibe. I love like the Andy Griffith Show. That's like my favorite show of all time. And so I take inspiration from, at least, I don't know, the way I like to think of it is I always try to start with something that people wouldn't guess I'm into or like think that I have an interest in. And then I try to bring that into my own world. So let's just say I'm at a 50s diner and I see like, let's just say I'm drinking this really delicious old school cup looking milkshake. And I'm like, oh man, this milkshake is fire. I like it. I'm gonna start to listen. I'll go on Spotify and I'll listen to songs from the 50s that they used to play at that diner. And I'll like listen to it with my headphones. And I'm going to try my best. What I try to do is I try to like hum rap melodies over those old songs, like find ways where I can kind of like get into the pockets of those songs. And then when I get home, I'll either reach out to one of my friends who makes the beats for me. I tried to make my own beats, not my thing. I realized that early on. So I reach out to my friends to do that, to make me a beat that kind of suits that same vibe. And they're at this point, we have this great relationship, like with multiple people. I have like my main rap, like producer, beat maker. He's in Poland, like of all places. And so he like always sends me really good beats. He knows my style at this point. And I just try to bring it into my own world. Like I have a song, it's not on Spotify, because I'm trying to get the rights for it, but it's really hard. I sampled the Andy Griffith theme song. So like that whistle, like, I sampled that and I rap over it. And basically during the rap, I'm talking about how, in the Andy Griffith show, they live in Mayberry and it's very like old timey and very like, the coolest thing you can do is like go to the store and get a bottle of pop. Like that's a fun day. And I love that. And it's so simple. And the whole song, I'm talking about how, we're obsessed with like our phones now. And, we don't like go to the store and get a bottle of pop and we don't consider that fun, and I'm like, what happened to that? And generally speaking, I feel like that's how I write. I try to find things that are like unorthodox, usually in pop culture, because I'm a big pop culture nut. And I'll find things that I feel people don't realize I'm a fan of, but I am, because I'm a fan of so many things. And I try to make that rap, try to bring it into the rap world. So I usually start, once I have that idea, that's when I start writing. So sometimes it's when I get the beat, sometimes it's before. And if it's before, I'll just write a few lines that I feel encompass what I'm trying to say. And then once I have the beat, then I kind of mold it in terms of the flow and making sure that it fits right on the beat. And, I'm like switching up flows and everything like that. But
It's so good to know too for people who maybe would be wanting to get into the type of stuff you're doing, because it obviously takes time, right? Like even though you don't experience writer's block, it's this long process. So I remember when I used to want to write song lyrics, if they didn't come to me in about 5 minutes, I was like, well, fuck this, I can't do this. And, so the idea that it requires like patience too, and
for sure.
And I think also your joy in everything and your curiosity in everything, I really like feeds into everything you do.
Yes.
Your interest. So anyway, yeah. And so lyric Anna Nas, does that resonate, that process with you when you're writing, or do you have different processes? How'd that resonate?
For me, it's very different, but I'm so inspired. I love the fact that you've got a persona, and it seems so obvious now that you say it, but having someone that you kind of fall into that kind of lets you be that exaggerated version of yourself, and eliminates those, I guess, the kind of egoic barriers that pop in, like this is shit, or just chuck this in the bin, it's not working. And even, oh crap, I've got writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about me kind of thing. Because as you know, I write more kind of, I guess they're like essays, really, like journal entries, which, yes, when read, I like poetry for sure. And I did for a while say that I was a poet for a few years. But the reason that I say that I don't own that as a kind of title anymore, as a kind of, is because I don't really link. I wouldn't call everything that I write poetry, and I don't really link poetry to my identity, to my sense of identity, whereas I do with acting. I like that, being able to go into another world completely and take on other people's writing and make it not writing anymore is completely different. Like even sometimes spoken word poets, I'm like, what is this tone of voice that you're doing? It's driving me insane. I can't hear the words anymore. I can't hear what you're trying to say.
That's called slam voice.
I hate
I get my
it.
poet voice.
No, I don't hate it all the time. It's appropriate at points, but like sometimes I'm like, oh, that would be so much. Just say it. Just say the words.
Yeah.
Just say them. But yeah, I'm inspired. I want to play around with like a bit of a. I'm intrigued. Who's going to be my persona? My little pseudonym. I think I need one because I'm just so vanilla.
Not true either, though. Naz and Lyric, do you feel like you've developed personas through yours?
I don't know if I've developed a persona. It's because I'm like on and off when it comes to my art. Like all of it. One second I'm like, I'm a flipping artist, and 2 seconds later I'm like, I don't know, man. I like to look at shit. There's in betweens, but before I lose it, I lost it. JK. I was gonna ask Calvin a question. It was kind of. I want to talk about how like you kind of low-key were like sampling in a way before you were even sampling, how you were like inspired by other music.
Right.
I think that's a huge part of the music industry. I think that's a huge part of like art in general. You know, you see some other art and you're like, holy shit, I want to go make some art. You know, even listening to you now, it's like I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do next?
Same.
I think artists, when we get together, we like talk to each other and then it's like, okay, art mode.
That's how artists. We act like writing's a solo activity, but it's totally a communal thing. We talk to our friends about what we do. We have feelings. We explore them with people. And then sometimes we reach out to a friend and they're like, you know what would be better if you did it this way? Though usually my friends are more like, hey, I wonder how it would feel if you did it this way. Or like, I'm curious if you flipped around these stanzas, how that would read. And I mean, they're almost always right. I have very smart friends.
That's interesting, because I actually wanted to ask you, Calvin, have you ever worked with like, because like I have a lot of artist friends as well, that musicians specifically, and I've noticed that, especially in the music industry, sometimes like working with other people can be problematic. I'm not saying that it is. It just and then again, it's anywhere, right? Have you ever felt like, you know, you've worked with a producer or like someone that makes beats or like whatever, like I don't know terms, but you know, like the people that be making the noises and sounds and stuff. You know, those ones. And do you ever feel like sometimes that they strip away from like who you are? Have you ever like ran into conflict in that, like maybe in the early stages? Or do you think like overall it's been a pretty smooth journey?
Solid question. Once again, A1 question. Love that. Okay. In terms of producers, like the people who are making the beep bop boop noises, they for the most part, I feel like I haven't had any clashes yet on my journey, in terms of, just because I would say I'm pretty picky in terms of like the beats that I get on. And so I'll reach out to a producer if I've already heard some of like their music online and I know that their style kind of connects with mine. And so I'll know right away, like when I reach out to a producer, that I want to work with them because of the style that like matches. And so, sorry if you hear my chihuahua in the background. I think he saw someone outside and now he's gonna bark for like 2 hours. It's a thing. But but in terms of what your question really raises, like a good topic that I forgot about. Like I if you listen to my albums, you'll notice right away that I have a lot of features. Like I feature a lot of different artists. And
which I love, because you're putting all your homies on. I love that.
Right, yeah.
We're in your bed. Artist supporting artists.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. And that's what's beautiful. Like it started with putting my homies on, because like in 2006 when I was rapping, I got like my little cousin who was 9 years old to just start rapping. And we were like, she went by Nizzle without the E. And we would just rap, and she would, and this is before I learned how to like use recording software. So I was literally using an 80s boom bap like tape player, and I was recording on a tape player. And it was amazing. And like those memories, she actually just got engaged last week. And I was talking to her about it. I was like, oh my gosh, like, you went from like boom bap, like rap music with me in my bedroom, and now you're engaged. Like, I feel so old. Like, what's going on?
Is there going to be a reunion at the wedding?
Oh my gosh.
That should happen. Yeah, that definitely should happen. I feel.
We'll all be there. Yeah.
Right? But the thing is, like, because I love to work with, like, I loved working with my cousins, especially in those early years. But now with like streaming and the fact that artists can connect even when they're on opposite sides of the world, I've thankfully, like, I didn't even realize it until around like this time last year, that I've kind of garnered this like small group of artists from all around the world who I regularly work with. And it's pretty amazing because they all have very different styles for me. So for example, like, I have a song that I did in 2018 called Meant to Be. And it features a singer named Deandra Miranda. She's actually like a family friend of mine. So she is here, but her interests are like Shakespeare and like Mozart and like, you know, music that I wouldn't on the daily basis listen to. So it's very different. They're very different. And so her style of singing is very far from a singer that's traditionally linked with hip hop and like R&B and the music that I make. And so I reached out to her because I was like, I want to do something different. Like, I was like, yo, Deandra, like, can we make our respective sounds and styles meet on one song? Like, can that be possible? And so she came over one day and literally we just spent the day working out ideas and writing. And the song is called Meant to Be. And basically we're talking about how we found music in our journey, our respective journeys in finding music. And so on my verse, I mentioned how I wish I was Eminem. And I remember, you know, being in my room wanting to be Eminem. And in her verse, she's talking about like, I remember hearing Mozart for the first time and I was so inspired by that. And literally at the end, like, you don't expect it. Like, I'm like rapping and I'm just like doing my thing. I'm not much of a singer, but I'm kind of singing there. And then when the beat drops, she just does this like, I can't do it. Like, she does opera. So all of a sudden, like, the voice just like, it's just opera all of a sudden mixed with hip hop. And it was wild. And I was really proud of that moment because I think that that's one of like the defining things that I love so much about music is, you know, I also am one of those people, like, while I say I'm a rapper, I believe that I've done so much more than that. And I definitely cross genres all the time. I've done a pop punk album. I've done an R&B album. And I've worked with so many different artists. I don't like a lot of country music, but I've worked with country artists and I've made it. And I think that it's beautiful in the sense of, you know, when I work with different artists, it allows me to like operate in a space that I would otherwise be too afraid to operate on my own. And then when they kind of give me that confidence because they're coming from this other field that I'm so unfamiliar with, we make it work. And it's like, I can conquer this too. And we can conquer this together. And so my latest album that just came out like 3 weeks ago with Tate Brown, she's a singer in Australia. We've never met. The reason why I did an album with her and why this happened was because one night at 2 a.m., I was Googling myself as one does. And and I found a random cover of one of my songs on YouTube at 2 a.m. It had 15 views and it was by a singer named Tate Brown. She had a beautiful voice. And I was like, holy shit, like, oh my gosh. So I reached out to her. And I was like, yo, I just want to thank you for like covering my song. I think it's beautiful. And she was like, oh my God, like, I didn't think you would respond. Like, what? I can't believe it. And she was like fangirling a little bit. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, I don't see myself like that. Like, I was like, it's amazing. And so we started talking and I, like classic Calvin, I asked her, I'm like, can I sample this? Like, I want to sample this video. And she was like, well, I mean, I do have a studio mic. Like, I can just re-record it and make it sound really good. And I was like, wait. You have a studio mic? And she was like, yeah, I can record. And I was like, oh shit. And that's when we realized right then and there that we had to do an album together. And so we did a whole 10-song album. We've never stepped foot in the same room. but now that we have done a whole album together, like her mom follows me, my dad follows her, and like we're all just like connected, and my friends know her and her friends know me. It's a beautiful thing, and that I feel like that can only happen with music and like art in general. It's such a beautiful thing.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That is like, that right there is like clear power of like social media and how artists can connect, you know?
Yeah.
That makes me so happy. Oh my gosh.
Also listen to it, because I was listening to it this morning, and if you haven't heard it yet, it's a seriously good album. I was grooving to it up until 5 minutes before I left it.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. Oh,
This is the album that you recently dropped, correct?
Yes, it's called 7D 19 Hour or 19H. So the meaning behind the title just is 7D. Like we just tried to make it as like weird as possible. That was pretty much our goal. And so 7D just kind of represents. I found her video on June 7th, 2020, and then 19 hour is the time difference between Australia and here. Vancouver. So we just wanted to do that. And it's just so weird because like whenever she would send me vocals, I would be asleep. And whenever I sent her vocals, she would be asleep. So we were never awake creating these songs together. So when we hear the completed song, we're like, this is amazing.
That's so cool. It's like you'd wake up to the next part to your song just been like, oh, what am I waking up to today?
Exactly. Yeah.
Magic. Awesome. I also love the, go ahead, sorry.
I just was saying that's so cool. You go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, just the idea of like interdisciplinarity, which is so important. So just on a podcast with Tom Oliver, who is an ecologist but works, he kept emphasizing the importance of art, the arts and creatives. And when Naz and I were talking to Annemie Paul, leader of the Green Party, she was like, creatives are the people who are going to change the world right now, and we need them. And that is so, so true. And then also, Calvin, the idea that you're sort of combining different disciplines, like that's in academia, we need that, right? We need to combine, and that's what you're doing through music and genre and through collaborating, which bring more connections together, which is so mind-boggling to me. And then what I think is really cool. So there's this writer, Jeremy Lent, and he describes harmony as sort of the coming together of disparate things coming together and creating something richer and more beautiful and expansive. And so it's like you have this beautiful art, and instead of keeping it to yourself, you're like sharing it with others. So are you feeling like the more people that you get to work with, the more sort of creative you get?
Oh, hands down, yes.
Yeah.
I think there's always that little bit, like, because I grew up on like Eminem and 50 Cent. Eminem and 50 Cent have this very like, I'm the best, like I don't need to work with anybody. Like, at least, especially in 50 Cent's early days.
Yeah.
So I always had that persona starting into it. And I remember like, I would always be thinking in my head, like, no, like I'm the best. I don't need to work with anybody. But as I've gotten older and I started to collaborate and kind of expand my horizons that way, it's just made me into such a better artist, because I get perspectives from so many different minds and like hearts and how they work together. And like, even just like when, like, for example, when I first started working with Tate Brown, I would just ask her, like, it was weird, but I was like, this might sound weird, but it just helps our creative process and getting to know each other. Like, would you mind sending me like clips of you working? Like, if you could just on your iPhone, like film yourself working on our songs, and I'll do the same and I can send it to you. So we can kind of get a sense of how we both work. And I feel like that'll improve the song, honestly, because it'll kind of, like, we will try our hardest to make sure that when people are listening to this song, I want them to believe that we're actually in the same room vibing together. And that was the goal. And just weird things like that, where it's like, I'll often ask like people that I work with for like just mini video clips, not only for promotion, but just because I'm just so curious in how everybody works, because everybody works differently. And I just love to watch that unfold. I find that like so beautiful. So yeah.
Oh, I feel that really hard. It's why I really like going to writing groups and co-working and having co-working spaces where you check in every so often and let people know what you're working on. I really feel that. And hearing about other people's processes makes me realize new ways that I could be creating.
Right.
I love you're starting with the contrast of history and your life. It's a really cool way to approach just thinking about things and finding little glimmers in reality.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that you guys say that, because I think ever since I've been writing, or even like, I think when I was in high school, I was in theater like a lot. And then I transitioned into writing. I was always told to like do my art by myself, like go do it and then come back. And recently I have a cousin who's a producer, and he was like, you should come over and just like write, and like I'll make my beats and like you chill. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And I like I want to, like, the idea of sitting with a like I said, like having conversations like this with creatives just makes me want to think more. And like the way you guys make it seems like, yeah, that's good, but I feel like that's just something I've never done. Do you guys have any advice?
Yeah, what are you doing later this week? You want to hang out? We can have a Zoom chat. We'll co-work. We'll get some writing done.
Absolutely. I'd love that.
Yeah, I find being able to mute myself helps. And that way I can have my own music going on if I like music. And then I can read out loud what I'm writing to myself. And then every 20 minutes or so, I like to check in with who I'm working with. Sometimes share what I'm working on if people are in a state where they're up for that.
Anna, do you think that for you in your creative process, you work with people too? Like connecting?
Honestly, I am hearing what you're putting down. For me, if I can do one or the other. I'm either blank slate, put me in a room with other people and I'll improv and we'll write a song there and then. Or it's really kind of sacred and like almost meditative. And in order for me to be with someone physically doing that thing, that writing, we have to be so on the same wavelength that it's not invading my sacred space. And I kind of hate that, because I definitely think, but then this is my writing, which are just journals, right? And nothing has been done with them as of yet. And I think when it goes to any next stage, like from this very baby creative
to the next stage,
if it's going to go to the next stage, it has to involve someone else, because I don't have any like perspective. I don't have any, it's just literally so tightly sewn to who I am. And I think that's part of the issue and why I'm so inspired about having a persona, because there's not enough distance. And I think it's so easy to kind of define ourselves as being this identity, and like I'm kind of quiet and I like to keep to myself, and I write like this, and I prefer to only collaborate in these situations. And it's so easy to get caught up in that this is how I am, and then there's no room for growth kind of thing. There's no room for change. And especially if you've had a couple of bad experiences of putting yourself into an uncomfortable situation and it going really badly, and then you going home to your room like, that was the worst experience of my life. I'm just going to stick to what I know in my little sacred space. So yeah, I think I've answered the question. I feel like
no, absolutely.
Corona is going to help me, definitely. Like alter ego, here I come.
Great.
I like how you kind of mentioned when you get like in the zone, it's like a meditative state. I feel like that even Brent, like when you're focused on one thing, it's just like that's it, and it's like everything else just kind of dissolves around you. You don't want to, like, I don't know about everybody else, but I feel like I get into that, and that place, to be in that place is beautiful, right? And like the idea of like sharing that is even more beautiful, because like I like to hear other people's like process. We watch movies and we see things, and we see people in their zone, and like when you watch that, it's inspiring, even though you're not there in their head, and God knows how amazing it is in the head, right? You just watch it and you're inspired. So like I totally get that, but like at the same time I get that like like Lyric, earlier you mentioned how sometimes when you show like your friends or your peers, they'll tell you that, you know, move a stanza like this. I think I'm just hanging out with really shitty artists. I've always just been criticized.
Also checking in for feedback too. Like not everyone's confident enough to do that, you know, or be like, hey, can I give you some feedback on this? Or I have an idea. Are you up for hearing it?
It's usually, my thing is, I think I've just like I said, I feel, because I'm a slam poet, right? It's very competitive. It's all about the points. It's all about the money at the end of the day, which I think is a big reason why I had to detach from like poetry for a while. And I feel like I've noticed that, like, I don't know, Calvin, if you agree, but I've noticed that in the music industry sometimes too, where like you want to like collab with someone. I've had a couple moments where I've like wanted to like do poetry over music, whatever, but like people would like, it's not necessarily steal, but it's a lot of like creative differences that get in the way. Do you guys feel like as artists you've ever had to encounter creative differences that have made you feel like you need to change your work for somebody else?
Yes.
Yeah. And I have had to hold my own. Also, just quickly, can I speak to something you said earlier before we get into it?
Crazy.
I love what you said about sharing a sacred space. And I think that for me, if I see somebody else starting to get into the flow and want them to get into the flow, I'm more likely to get into the flow myself. And I think that's why working in the same space or online space as other people works well for me. But yes, creative differences. They're fucking hard. And sometimes I just have to be like, actually, I really stand by this choice. This is what this choice means to me. What did you want to do with it? And just try to work to find some kind of compromise so that it doesn't feel like it's taking away from either of us. But if people aren't willing to be flexible with their creativity or ideas, then sometimes it's just not a good matchup.
Right.
Out of the flow state. What do you find, Calvin, then? Have you had that where you're almost taken out of the flow state or no?
Hands down. Yeah. I you know, there's been multiple, like even before Tate Brown, like there's been multiple projects that I've tried to start with other artists that just didn't end up panning out because of just creative differences and how we work together. Like there was, I won't name drop, but there was an artist that I was very excited to do an album with. I've done a couple of songs with this artist already. And we've been discussing since we started working to doing a project together. And I mean, there's obviously a big difference between doing a song for my album or a single that I'm going to put out versus a whole project, right? Like, I just feel like, especially early on, like this was a couple of years back, I would just get very overly excited about creating that I would just jump into a project without actually thinking about just the different ways people work and how it might not, you know, mesh with my way of working. And so there's this artist that I was, you know, planning a project with, and oh my gosh, like she's brilliant. I love her to death. I love her music. I love like what she creates. But I feel like I realized early on how it probably isn't going to work with a full album just because of how different we are working together. And I just feel like a lot, you know, she would have a lot of pushback with some of my ideas and kind of vice versa. And I just, you know, I think for me, as long as we're both still respectful, you still respect the artist, like, okay, this is not going to work for you. I totally get that. And maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe even like, maybe not forever, but just right now, it's not the right time for us to collaborate. And so we had that difficult conversation and we kind of respect each other more for that conversation. Just the fact that we were able to kind of like say, okay, maybe not now, but, you know, I still love you though, and I'm still going to support you. And we kind of had that conversation. So it's happened. I've also had some fallouts before, like there's people that I don't speak to anymore just because of how things worked out. But I think, and you know, maybe some of you will agree, I think that's just the reality of creating at the end of the day. Like you're not going to get along with everybody. There are going to be some fallouts. And I think at the yeah, it just lets you know that you're doing it. You're on that creative path, you know?
Totally. Well, yeah, we always get in sync with one another. So it's probably, again, like the vibrate sounds very hippie, but like the vibrations are off almost, right? And if you're writing music, then that's not going to work. I've noticed that with my writing. Usually it's solitary, everything I write, especially in academia, but I've been doing more collaborative work, like my 2 books coming out are collaborative, and like it's really hard at some points because also being held accountable, right? Because usually I can put things off forever and then like you have to put the deadlines, but you learn double what you would have learned otherwise, right? Because like in this collaboration, we're talking about the exact same thing, and then we come back and again, bring these minds together to create something better. So I just think what you're doing, Calvin, is so key. And so because you also rap about important things too, about like, we didn't even get into like a talk about mental health yet. So maybe I'll jump over to that because I feel like it's so important because you're also like a mental health advocate too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us more about that too.
Yes. So I guess I'll start with, let's go back to 2010 when I just did the Olympic performance. You got to understand, I was 17 years old at the time. I look like I'm 10 years old right now. So you're probably like, what? But anyways, it's fine. So I was 17 in 2010. And I feel like when you're that young and you just performed in front of 12,000 people, I was on my Kanye West a little bit there. I was feeling myself. I was like, oh shit, like I am the shit. You know, that was my mindset. And I just remember, like in 2012, I was part of a rap group, a high school rap group called Access Denied. And it was actually run by one of the like English 12 teachers at my high school. And it was such a cool experience. Like, so I had to agree when I joined the group in grade 12 that like I had to cut swearing from my music just for the year as I'm a part of Access Denied. And that was really hard because I'm a potty mouth. Like I love to swear. So like that was super tough for me. But I did it. And so I was part of this rap group and we got like TV interviews and like weekly TV interviews, like magazine interviews, like of the Olympic performance. And it was just such a great year in terms of my music. And I was just constantly on the grind. And because I was 17 and so young, I was just kind of like, all right, well, I am clearly the shit. And this is how life is going to be for the rest of my life. Okay. And then as I was graduating, like getting close to graduating high school, that realization hit me where I was like, maybe this isn't going to last forever. Like high school is about to end. Things are going to change. And that is when I started to notice out of nowhere, for the first time, I wouldn't say for the first time ever, but for the first time in a long time, I started to experience this like really deep sadness that I couldn't explain. And I remember like close to June of that year when I was getting really close to graduating, I would cry myself to sleep at night and I didn't understand why. And I would stop eating. So there was a solid 2 weeks or 3 weeks in there where I literally lived off a piece of like, those like hot rod pepperoni sticks. Yeah. I started it Monday of 1 week and I ended that pepperoni stick on the third week because that was all I was eating. And I just had like fruit punch and milk. And I just felt terrible. And I didn't know why I couldn't eat. Like I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep right. And I remember granted, because I felt like shit, I stopped rapping and recording and creating and all of that. And my friend, I have a best friend. Her name is Jennifer. Shout out to Jennifer. She was diagnosed with clinical depression when she was a young child. And so she had a lot of experience. And I think, she noticed right away when I was acting different and it looked like I was out of my element. And so she reached out to me and she was like, Calvin, I've noticed that you have stopped recording. You're not smiling. You're not hanging out with friends. Like, what's going on? And I didn't know what to say to her. She called me up. And so I wasn't saying anything. And she was like, okay, Calvin, well, how about this? Like, how about we meet at a park today and we can talk about it? And I was like, okay, I haven't really gone out much for the last bit. So maybe this is good for me. So I remember it was a sunny day. I went outside. I met with her at the park near my house. And she asked me, I remember she was like, okay, Calvin, so what's going on? And I didn't have much to say. And so it was just like a really short answer. And her and I are super close. Like we're so close to the point that, even like teachers feel like we're the same person. Like we have so much in common. And so she was like, Calvin, I've known you for years. Like, is it okay if maybe I take a guess as to what's going on? Like, is that okay? And one, I already appreciated right there. Like, she asked me that permission, like if it was okay. Because so when I said yes and it was fine, she then was like, okay, well, Calvin, I know that you've never been great with change, and you've never been great with especially those big life changes. And that's happening for you right now. You just finished high school. You're starting, it's wild to think that this was like 11 years ago, but you're starting Kwantlen University. Like this is happening, and you're probably really nervous. And maybe that's why you're not being able to sleep, because maybe you feel like you're not going to be able to top your grade 12 year. Like, how are you going to top that? And right when she said all that, I remember thinking like, oh my God, she understands me. Like, oh my God, she gets it. And I remember I didn't say anything. I just fell into her arms, just like crying and happy that she understood. And the next thing she said was the most important thing. It was super simple, but it was very important to me. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, Calvin, it's okay to feel this way, but we're going to get through this together. And that meant the world, because she didn't offer me like advice or what she thinks I should do. She was just listening and validating what I was feeling. And, I love my parents and I'm grateful for all the support they gave me. But even in 2010, like, we still have a lot of work to do, but mental health has come a long way even from 2010 to now. In 2010, mental health wasn't even like talked about at all. Like, it wasn't a thing that I heard of. And so when I started to describe to my parents what I was experiencing and like the anxiety and stuff, they were just like, oh, it's all in your head, it'll go away. They kind of just brushed it off. So yeah, she got it right away. And she ended up coming with me on my first day at Kwantlen. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, there's more than one building in university. What sorcery is this? Like, what is going on right now? And I was so nervous. Okay. So she doesn't like, we have this like, she always like gets a little mad at me when I tell this story, but I have to tell this story. She's like, no, I don't want Kwantlen to know that I was like, drawing on their walls and stuff. But okay. So, it's just the cutest story. It's like if this was a movie. This is like literally the beginning of the movie and people are like, oh, anyways. So to make me feel better, like, I'm proud to say now that my journey as a Kwantlen University student, I enjoyed more than high school, and I was able to, accomplish even greater things with my music. And now I work at Kwantlen as an advisor. Like, it's pretty amazing. And, but on that very first week, my friend Jennifer, she was nice and kind enough to come with me every day that week. I'm like wondering now, like, wait, I know that she was working, so how was that even possible? But anyways, she like came with me every day, and she ended up drawing a little smiley face on the wall next to my classroom, like my one classroom. So she was like, so Calvin, like, whenever you feel anxious, when you get to your classroom, just look at that smiley face and just know that I'm there, like I'm there for you. And it was like, oh, that was all I needed. Like, it was beautiful. And it
That's
just really
wholesome vandalism.
Yeah, right?
We allow that form of vandalism.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we all need smiley faces by the doors of classrooms when we feel anxious. Remind us.
Yes. Right. It really helps. And so, now I can't say, looking back on it, there was definitely hard times in my university experience. And, I did speak with many counselors, and I did have times where I struggled, of course. But my music has always been very mental health oriented, even when I didn't realize it. Because, as I told you through my story with finding Eminem, like, I always knew right away that even though in like grade 7, when I started rapping, where I dressed like a gangster and I wore a do-rag and I wore only G-Unit clothing, and like my jeans were like way too big for me and I was super short, so I looked really stupid. Even when I dressed like that, I knew that my music had to reflect what I went through. And so because I was always reflecting in my music, I was reflecting on being bullied, on those experiences of feeling alone. I was already kind of covering mental health before I even knew what mental health was. And so essentially, I just kind of realized, especially when, mental health started to kind of creep its way into like pop culture and just like society in general, that like, I'm a mental health advocate. Like, I feel like this is definitely something I'm passionate about, because this is why I made music in the first place. Like, I want people to feel good about themselves when they hear a song of mine, And so on top of music, I've recently, in the past few years, you may have heard, I've worked with organizations like jack.org. I'm a jack.org speaker, where I go to different high schools and I talk about mental health. And I actually run my own outreach program called Frontier Poetics. I haven't done it in a while now because of COVID. COVID kind of stopped that a little bit, but I go to different high schools and universities, and I speak to students about my life story, finding Eminem. It's really weird though, because I'm getting to an age. This is wild. Ready? Brace yourself, folks. I'm getting to an age where I'll mention the real Slim Shady, and kids don't know what that is. They don't know what the real Slim Shady is. And I'm like, okay, guys, like, relax. but yeah.
Start your speeches with that song.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, but yeah, I talk to students about my journey. And then the other half of the workshop, essentially, is me working with the students on finding their own passions and their own version of hip hop. And it's just work I really enjoy. And when students come up to me after the show, I promise you this is not a Kanye thing, maybe a little bit, but when students come up to me after the show and they're like, Calvin, because of you, like a high school kid will come up to me and be like, because of you, I want to go to university now, or I want to pursue this. It's like, holy shit, really? And it's just such an incredible feeling. And there's nothing like it. There's nothing like feeling like you're making a change and difference in a positive way. So I love that. Yeah.
Oh, you're amazing. Lyric, does that, because you do a lot of work on mental health and movement and poetry too, right? Like, does that connect to what you're doing too?
Oh yeah, a lot. So for those who don't know, I'm starting up my own life coaching business. We're going to be doing our first groups before the end of August, as soon as I get my permits sorted out, just waiting on that good old bureaucracy. But we're going to be working on coping with social anxiety and COVID uncertainty. Social anxiety has been my thing my whole life. And I was a, little not a girl who didn't realize I had ADHD and struggled a lot. And people didn't recognize it in me. I only got diagnosed with ADHD when I was like 21, maybe even older than that. It was in my early to mid 20s. So, and yes, I know I also look like I'm 12, but definitely old enough for that to feel like a while ago. Yeah. So I recently sent out a bunch of feedback surveys to the peer support group that I've been running throughout the pandemic. I also do social dancing. It's one of my big passions and it's wonderful. So I ran a group for dancers throughout the pandemic. So many of us were feeling so damn touch starved. Holy shit, when all of your social life revolves around touching people and so much of your creativity also revolves around that, it's such a huge blow to the self to not be able to do that. And I got my feedback surveys start rolling in past couple days, and oh man, I cried last night. Someone wrote something really wonderful about what was it? Wanting to work with someone who has been through things and not just read about them in books, and someone who makes it feel like it's worth the work. Someone like Lyric. And I was just like, hi, but also thank you. That's going on my website. I love you. So yeah, I've been feeling big feels around being told I made a big difference in people's lives the past couple of days. It's been a delightfully emotional past couple of days.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to ask you if you feel comfortable talking about it. You don't have to, but you know how you sent me those really amazing videos? You're talking about horror and your interest in movies, and what you sent me. That, do you want to talk about that quickly? Like
for sure, yeah, of course, I love to put shine on that because I feel like nobody really knows about that. So I as I mentioned, I'm a huge horror fan. I'm wearing a Pulp Fiction shirt today, but like 90% of my clothes are like horror pop culture t-shirts and like jeans and stuff. But also like when I got my Michael Myers tattoo, you can like bet that my mom didn't speak to me for like 4 months, like solid straight, like it wasn't a thing. But but yeah, so I've always been inspired by horror, and I think just to explain it in a very brief sense, like not that I feel like y'all will most likely understand it anyway, but regardless, I just think that horror is such a genre where like I like to have philosophical conversations with my friends at 2 a.m. Like I'm that kind of guy. Like I do that all the time. And I think horror is just the closest that we can get, like as an audience, to like experiencing what is out there and like death without actually experiencing it. And I've always found that like scary but beautiful in a way, and I think that's why I love horror movies. And so in 2017, I was working on an album that's called Copy 37, and it was going to be my first album ever released on streaming services. So I wanted to make sure that this album was different, it was special, it was new level, and I was really tweaking it and making it, you know, something different. And so I was with my longtime high school friend. It was like 7 p.m. We were at Tim Hortons eating chili. And I remember we were just discussing ideas for music videos for the album. And this friend of mine, he's really good at video editing. And he was just like, yeah, like I could do videos for you for sure, like hands down. And so we're discussing ideas, and we kind of realized that there was a lot of songs on the album that were like really soft and like cutesy love songs on the album that are really like, they felt like one song, but they were also very different at the same time. And so because of my love for horror movies and my love for just cinema in general, we thought like, wouldn't it be cool if we can somehow make it so, I don't know, like I can't think of a good example right now, but I'm sure maybe one of you will know an example. But like, have you ever heard a song and you're like, okay, this is a good song, solid song, and then you watch the music video and it's like fucked up, it's like something that you don't like, right?
Yeah, and that shit's the best though.
Right? Yeah, no, it's the best. That's what I'm saying.
It's
exactly.
The best.
Because it really captures your attention and it makes you remember the song even more, right? So I wanted to do something like that. I was like, I must do something like that. And we came up with this idea where it was going to be kind of my ode to Psycho and like Norman Bates and just like my love of horror movies. And so essentially, I have a song called Walking and Talking, where it's like really cutesy. Like the chorus is like, I want to be walking and talking with you. It's like really cutesy. And it's like just a cutesy love song. And we made the video. In the video, it's just a guy stalking this blonde through an old-timey town. We filmed in Fort Langley. I told you I love Fort Langley. And at the very end, she gets bagged and kidnapped and put into the car. And it gets more and more, like if you watch it in the very beginning, you're just following this girl walk through Fort Langley in different stores. But you start to notice me in several shots of those scenes. So it's like, oh, like Calvin's over there, Calvin's over here, Calvin's over there. And that's when you start to notice, okay, something's a little bit off about this Calvin here that's following this girl. And you start to realize as the video goes on, it gets more and more fucked up. And the video is in 3 parts. So there's 3 different songs, but it continues. It's like one movie. So if you put it all together, it's like a 30-minute movie. And essentially, you'll notice that like it's all connected. So the first part, you see me following this blonde girl. And then at the very end, I kidnap her. The second part is a prequel. So it's before the events of the first one. And you realize in that second part that she's actually my coworker. And I asked her out, but she denied me. And so that's why I was like, okay, I need to get her. And then the third part and the final part and the most fucked up is following the events of that first part. So following the events of the kidnapping. And so essentially, we filmed it in black and white to give it that old-timey Hitchcock feel. And it's literally like 7 minutes of pure disturbing, like, holy shit, I didn't know. Like, I wanted to really shake up. Like, I feel like whenever somebody meets me, they're like, oh, Calvin, he's so innocent. I'm like, oh, I love Calvin. He's like, oh, I want to hug Calvin. I wanted to fuck that up, you know? And so this third video is like super disturbing. I don't think my mom knows it exists, and that's probably for the better. But it's it's very disturbing, and I'm honestly really proud of it because of just it encompasses everything that I'm into: movies, music, old-timey like things like Fort Langley. We were like sipping milkshakes and stuff. I play a lot with the stereotype of like the sexy blonde girl in the videos, which you'll notice. And we actually, for the first time too, like in my music videos, I usually just work with friends. But for this video, because we wanted to make it really cinematic and treat this right, we actually wrote a script for all three of the videos, and we held auditions to hire an actress. We found this wonderful person. Her name is Morgan Gallivan, and we're friends now. We've done songs together too, because she's a singer as well. But she, in the casting call, I had to put it out there because I was like, yo, so just know I'm not like really an actor, so like you gotta like work with me here and be chill and just be cool with that. And two, just know that there's like several makeout scenes on top of this disturbing like fucking thing. So as long as you're cool with like making out with me, then yeah, I mean, cool. And so she definitely couldn't happen now with like COVID and stuff. I feel like that would be a little hard. Yeah. But it was a beautiful time. She met with us at a Starbucks. And I thought as soon as I explained the whole story, she was going to be like, fuck that. But she was like, this is such an amazing project and I would love to do it. And so she did it. Oh my gosh, she killed that third. Like when she had to act, like basically she's like chained up in my basement. She has tape on her and like everything's messed up. And there was a scene where she has to scream like as loud as she can, like help. We had to tape on my garage door, like we're filming a video, please don't call the cops. Like this is a thing. And it was just a really fun day because it's so different from what I usually do. And when I was getting to know Bryn and like when I realized that she wasn't the I am a professor and I write essays and that is all I do and there is no fun here. When I realized she wasn't like that, I was like, yo, I'm gonna show Bryn this series here. And I feel like she would appreciate it. And when she saw it, it was just like, yes, I knew that she would like it and appreciate it. And so it's just something I'm really proud of. And I hope that down the road, more people will check it out for sure.
I want to check it out like right now.
I'll send you the link. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I can do that for sure. Yeah, let me do that.
Yeah, there's so many cool contrasting layers. It sounds like it seems like that's quite the theme throughout a lot of your art, whether or not it's a conscious thing between the sweetness and the horror and the old timey and the new vibe.
Yes,
so cool. I really, really like that.
Thank you.
Something interesting that came to me when you were talking about what you like about horror is like, and this is my analytical brain coming in. Yeah. It's like, it's so interesting because we don't assume people who make horror are, horrific people who want to do this in real life. But sometimes we attach people too much to their art when it's not something that is so obviously awful. And I just thought that that's a little nugget, a little food for thought for us to take with us and for the listeners to have a think about is like, we don't judge someone who makes a horror film because it's horrible. Yeah. And I don't think art, yes, and my like thesis at uni was all about the artist's responsibility and how actually if we're choosing to put something out into the world, we have to be aware of the possible impact it could be having. There's one thing to create something, and there's another thing to share that with the world.
Right.
But at the same time, like, once something is out, it's not, you can like it or you can not like it.
For sure.
Or you can not like the effect it's having, or you can like the effect it's having, but ultimately it's not there to be judged. That's not what art is. And I think sometimes it just struck me because I'm like, I don't like horror a lot of the time. Sometimes I do. And I used to love it, interestingly, loved it as a child. And then like somewhere as a teenager, just didn't like it. Sometimes I think maybe something was like a little bit too triggery, or just made me yeah. And then it made me think, what's the point of this? Like, is the whole point of this to make me feel awful? But again, it's like, yeah, I just think it's an interesting thought to have, because because there are other things that I don't like, because maybe like politically I think it's dangerous, or because I think it's a crap sense of humor that takes the piss out of women, or is like, but ultimately art is art. And whether or not I like it, whether or not I think politically it is damaging, what doesn't matter really, because my opinion doesn't really matter. But yeah, I was just like, yeah.
I appreciate that comment.
It doesn't necessarily mean that the person who created it believes it.
Yeah,
right.
I think importantly, and it's making me think about those things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, well, that's the thing. Like when I was creating this, when me and my friend were creating this idea, it's called the Monomaniac Series. And when I decided that I was, gonna play this character that was so opposite of who I am and everything that I believe in, it was like, I was afraid, because obviously I know my mom would say right then and there, like, Calvin, don't do this. This is not how I raised my son. Like, this is not how it's going to be. And I knew that I was going to get a lot, just generally, just based on what I'm dealing with. Like, I'm kidnapping someone and I'm doing these disturbing things. Like, it's dark, and not everybody is going to like it. And that's just the reality. So there was a brief moment in time when, in the midst of creating these videos, I had the actress, we agreed to do it. We started shooting things. It was only when it became the reality that, oh my God, I'm actually working on this, that it was like, oh shit, like, should I actually be putting this out? Because can this ruin me? I had the girl that I was dating at the time. She like, I sent her a little rough draft of like the video, and she showed it to her mom. Ooh,
Oh no!
Not a good idea. Not a good idea. I was like, why would you do that? Right?
No. Like uncut, not edited.
Yeah, right. And
why?
Yeah, no, that was terrible. That was terrible. But anyways, I got a big lecture. Like, she called me. She was like, "You're gonna ruin your life. You're not gonna find a job," and all of that stuff. And she was just really angry. And obviously, I understood just based on the topic and stuff. I tried to explain it, but she just wasn't getting it. And then, honestly, what gave me the push to go forward with it was there's a professor, I call him, I don't know if you know, his name is Greg Chan. I call him my KPU dad. He's like a very educational dad to me, very father figure. I call him Father Gregory as well. But I studied psycho in his class. So I actually saw psycho for the first time when I took a Greg Chan class. And because of that, and because I know that he's such a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock, I actually went to him early on when I was planning this idea. And when he saw the script, he read through it, I explained the idea and why I'm doing it. When he gave me the go ahead and was like, honestly, like, kind of like what you said, like, art is art. Not everybody's going to like it. And when you put something out like this, you have to expect pushback. Like, that's a given. So when he kind of gave me that pep talk, I was like, fuck it, I'm doing this. And I'm so glad. Yeah.
It's sort of the point. That pushback is
Right.
part of it.
Yes,
And
exactly.
what people take away from it is what they need to take away from it. If you're so shocked by it, then
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the whole point. She talks about she wants to elicit horror in her readers, and then that horror can also be moral in a sense, but it's like you're outside yourself, you see this other like way of being, and then obviously it goes back to the persona thing too. Like people have to realize that Calvin is not a kidnapper in real life, right? Like it's amazing art. Like I'm like Anna, I can't watch horror at all. Like I really like stuff like Get Out and like really sort of, but I can't take it. But that was so smart and well done, and it's such a story, and it like honestly any plugs, Calvin?
Check out my latest album with Australian singer Tate Brown. It's called 1719H. Beautiful piece of work, and that's pretty much all I have going on.
That's amazing. You want to plug what you're doing, Lyric? Because I feel like it seems to be good to get it out.
For sure. So next week, I'm assuming my website will be up by then, just waiting on those sweet testimonials. But it'll be conscious-strides.com. So Conscious Strides, I do life coaching and support groups. I do one-on-one stuff. We're going to be starting with coping with COVID anxiety and peopling as we get through this next phase of the pandemic, where no one really knows what's going on, even though everything's still changing. So if you want to be uncertain with other people while trying to work towards something small, because let's get real, it's been hard to get wins under our belt in the past little while. Or if you want to work towards something bigger, it's a space to work towards stuff with people and have some feelings in a really low pressure environment.
I'm interested. I want to. I love it.
Yeah, sounds exactly what I need, to be honest.
And if you don't have me on the internet, feel free to add me. I'm on Instagram as well as at conscious.strides. I should double check that before I head out into the world. You know how it is when you're making a million promo pages for yourself and all the things that you do. Okay. At conscious.strides on Instagram. So that will be slowly filling up with stuff as I keep rolling with this. And Calvin, if you ever want to bring your workshop about teaching people about passions to my business, I would very much be up for it.
Yes, say no more. Yeah, that down for sure. Yeah.
I'm going to have to go soon before I melt into this chair and get out and get some air into my lungs. It's been so good to hear from you again, Calvin.
It's so good to see you again.
Hope to see you.
Beautiful. Yes, okay. Well, I love all of you so much. Calvin, thank you again. And Anna,
of course. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It was the best. You're the best. Mwah. See you guys soon.
Bye.